Ladies and gentlemen, once again, we are back with another exchange on our podcast. I'm your host, Cameron Nicholas, and today I have not only a leader, but a teacher and an activist. Brittni Jennings, a former educator in the Philadelphia School District, shares her story as an educator, activist, and leader. The recipient of the David McCullough Prize for Excellence in American Public History and the Lindback Award for Distinguished Public Teachers. She has made a significant impact on students at Constitution High School in Center City, Philadelphia, where she taught African American history and social science for nearly 10 years. Ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor and a privilege for me to introduce to you Brittni Jennings.
Hello.
See, if I had some like claps, I would clap. I would.
Appreciate the intro.
On a serious note, seriously. Many people who don't know, this is my blood sister.
Hello.
I know she's lighter, but that's my blood sister. On a serious note, I took the time and I read a lot of the articles that I've seen online, and I didn't know you did that much. I'm not saying you don't do anything, but
you're such a stalker.
I didn't know. I really didn't know you did. You did a lot. You do a lot. You really, really do a lot.
I appreciate that.
So for those who aren't aware of you, I know I did my little introduction, but tell the viewing audience about yourself.
So my name is Brittni Jennings. I taught at Constitution High School, where I built my career as a public educator. I've been in education for, I want to say 10 years or a little over 10 years. I started as a after school program coordinator in a sense. I was a volunteer for the Charles Mellon Arts and Education Center, transitioned into adult education, and then eventually found my way in the classroom for the School District of Philadelphia. I no longer teach. Last year was my last and final year as a classroom educator, but I still am in education, still working for the School District of Philadelphia.
Yeah, learning never stops. Teaching never stops at all. Well, I remember you being at TD, and then that.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I remember you being at TD and at PNC. You were actually the reason why I'm in banking, honestly.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. That's such a blip in my life.
10 years. Started when I was 28. Yeah, I was 18. Started when I was 18. Been banking for 10 years.
Old.
But what made you transition from working in a bank to teaching?
That's a really good question. So I was a college major floater, if that makes any sense. So I started off at Westchester University, floated from major to major. I was a women's studies major, English major, art major, like nothing really stuck. And I remember I had this, I honestly don't know what class I had, but we had to get a certain amount of volunteer hours. My roommate at the time and I went to one of the volunteer fairs that Westchester had, and there was we went to numerous of stands, and we found a community center, Charles Mellon Arts and Education Center, which is in Westchester. I believe it's on Westchester Pike. And we volunteered there, where we were servicing, I believe it was Title I students in Westchester and the Coatesville area. We started off as tutors in a sense, and there was no, this is the early stages, so there's no real programming. We're kind of just college students going in and volunteering. But my roommate and I felt a need to cultivate a sort of structure. We felt like we're responsible for these kids for however long we have them. So it honestly started there. We were building curriculums from scratch, activities, coordinating with the community, local organizers and organizations at the time. And I think I just was drawn to that throughout my other career stints in banking and retail and whatnot. And then I ended up getting hired by them to lead their after school program with my roommate. And that's kind of when it started. I started taking myself as an educator a little more seriously. I don't even remember what my major was at the time, but that experience kind of catapulted me into the education space.
So it was more so you listening to you, sounds like you wanted to do more so for the community in a sense.
I would say so. I think it was just the idea that like you are a part of a child's growth. And I saw how important that was when you are creating spaces where students are learning like intentionally, like you're creating experiences with them and for them that they'll cherish for their lifetime. So I think it was that, and then the fun of creating. Like at the time, we were creating a lot of material from scratch. And I just thought about like, if I could do this professionally, this is what I would like to do. I would like to be in a space where I'm pouring into students, but also creating an experience that is unforgettable. Like I didn't, you know what I mean? Like I didn't want to have experience that I had in most of my classrooms. Yeah.
I know you mentioned childhood growth. So that being said, was there a teacher that contribute to your childhood growth?
Oh my gosh, yes. I have two. I believe these were the first Black teachers I had. Senior Coombs, who taught at Drexel Hill Middle School. He was my Spanish teacher. And then there was a woman by the name of, I think it was Miss Rob or Robin. And she taught me as a student educator. She went to Temple University. She was a student teacher. And then she got hired at that school. And I remember those were my first encounters with Black educators. And there was just something about them. Like they just had a different aura, the way their classroom structures were. Like it was always fun being in their classes. Like I always wanted to go to class. I participated a lot. I asked a lot of questions. I didn't know that was correlated with the idea that statistically students remember, like the most memorable educators in their experience are Black educators, specifically Black men. But I think I just found I was like tethered to these educators that were identifiable to me because that's the first time I ever seen Black people in a classroom space in that way, because I saw Black people in school outside of my peers, but they were janitorial workers. I don't even think we had any Black secretaries. The school was predominantly white. So they kind of left that impact on me.
Yeah, I remember. I remember Miss Rob because I think Miss Rob, I think she taught an art class.
She did.
I believe she did. But what I had her in, so I remember in high school when I was a senior, you had like after lunch, there was this, I would say a study hall.
The senior seminar?
Yeah.
Yep.
And
she was my senior seminar teacher.
She was my senior seminar teacher. And how she was just outside of just being a teacher, just as an individual. And even, it's funny because even when I would go to the store or wherever, I still see her. Even now, I still see her. And she's always been the same, very mal-mannered, but you can tell there was that sternness that was in her. And she even showed that even in her classrooms. Could you say that being around her and seeing her, you embodied those traits to wanting to become the teacher that you were?
If you're asking me, did she influence, I guess, like my presence as an educator? She did. I actually wrote my master's capstone about the impact of Black educators, and I wrote about her, like, ironically. But yeah, I wrote about like her countenance and like her attention to detail and how she poured into her students. And when I was in high school, my focus was art. Upper Darby High School kind of had tracks in a sense. We were known for our performing arts. And my focus was on fine art, specifically drawing. And I remember like she would push me, to experiment with different mediums. And she would always tell me like not to be comfortable with something that I was good at. She encouraged me to apply to art school. So I don't know. I think it's part being influenced by her as a female Black educator. And then it's also part just like how I was raised. I think educators that are impactful have like these maternal and paternal instincts, like they're parents in a sense.
Right.
Or they become parents to students in the classroom spaces that they share.
That's true.
So I would say it's a culmination of a lot of things. My former educators, my life experiences, my upbringing.
So because of those experiences and your upbringing, how has your teaching philosophy evolved over time?
How has it evolved over time? I think I don't know if it's my teaching philosophy that's evolved over time, or if it's really what I think my responsibility as an educator is over time, because I always believe that it was student first. Like, education should be student driven. The students are first. I always used to tell my students, like, schools don't exist without people in them. Like, I could be an educator all I want to, but like, if there are no people, students coming into the building, what am I doing? Nothing. But I think my approach as an educator has evolved over time. Like, when I first started, I had the Save the Children syndrome. I was gonna go in and save all the kids in Philadelphia, and like, I was gonna cultivate many Huey P. Newtons, and we were gonna start the next revolution. And
By any means necessary.
yes, by any means necessary. And I think that I didn't really like fully understand that there are small seeds that you plant as educators, and those things grow into, what your students become. And I guess that informed the content that I started to teach, and like the skills that I grew to focus on, and finding more intentional ways to create space where students were able to find themselves and exercise their autonomy. And if that meant that we didn't do the lesson that I planned that day, that's fine. If that meant we didn't get to that chapter in that book that day, that's fine. I had to learn not to do that. I think the other thing is, and I believe my teacher friends can identify, the longer or the older I became and the longer I was in a classroom, I had to learn how to separate myself from the students, in the sense that like the sharing and telling me about their experiences, I had to create like a space where it didn't overwhelm me so much, because I used to take a lot of things personal. Like, if they had a problem, their problem's not my problem, or if they weren't doing well in class, like, that's my responsibility, which was completely hypocritical, because I start my classes with my students identifying what's the responsibility of them as students, and then what's my responsibility as an educator. But I don't know, I think the more time you spend with the same group of kids for a long period of time, you kind of just are attached in a way where you kind of feel what they're feeling.
Yeah. And there's a sense of trust there too, and vulnerability.
Exactly.
Yeah. Speaking of students, what was a typical day like for you in a classroom setting?
A typical day, I mean, I guess this is like well, I won't say it's the standard, but we always had like an opening. They're called do nows. But I would always have like some sort of opener that I tried to make sure was interesting as possible. So we would have like poetry readings, or quote analyses, or if I found like a music video that I thought was like layered and connected to what we were learning, they would watch that. I tried to introduce them to something that I more than likely gauge that they weren't exposed to. And then from there, we just would talk. We had a lot of conversations in my class. So I think it's really just like creating a space for inquiry, and then we are delving into that inquiry. And sometimes my classes would end on a cliffhanger. Like, the discussion is so good, and I'm like, up the bell, bye guys, see you tomorrow.
Right.
Or sometimes they'll bleed into like, I'll have a group of kids talking to me, and I have other students coming in, or they'll be like, "Oh, Miss Jennings, you can do this in your next class. Can we stay here?" I wouldn't say it's like, what is it, Groundhog's Day? Like, everything's the same. Like, I wouldn't say that at all, because students are bringing their personalities, their traumas, their all the things.
Right.
But I would say a typical day is just filled with exchange. Like, I tried to make sure we were never silent in a space. And I tried to make sure my students were comfortable and participatory as much as possible.
Yeah, I think that's actually very important. You said something important about not being quiet, because you have, again, you reflecting on what you stated earlier about taking that parental role, taking on that parental role, because you have some students who come to school looking forward to speaking to a teacher, because they're not getting what they're getting at home. They're getting in school.
Right.
Whether it's something small, it's just attention.
Right.
Because you have some students that they come home, mom isn't there, dad isn't there, it's an older sister. And they don't have that example they can lean on. So they lean on what they get from their teacher.
Right.
So from that, what was the most rewarding part of teaching?
I would say the most rewarding part is when my students who graduated, or like say they're seniors and they're in these dual enrollment programs where they can take college courses, when they are contacting me and telling me, oh, Miss Jennings, we're learning about this, but we done talked about this in your class already. Oh, I'm reading this book. This is the second time I read it. Or I've had students message me like, Miss Jennings, some of these kids they should have been in your classroom. So it's just like their ability to connect and identify with something that we've talked about in like their 10th grade year. And if I had them again, their 11th grade year, and then see how that, I guess, transfers into their higher academic careers. But yeah, or just like hearing from students who I don't expect to hear from, that are like, oh, I'm just checking on you. Or like, finding out their accomplishments, like students that are becoming lawyers, folks that are getting married. I think just having you, like me, be a part of their life story, I would say is the most rewarding, especially if they become teachers. I think it's not like I'm like, oh, you have to be an educator. But when I've had a few students express that they've chosen to be educators because I was their educator. So that's always a nice feeling.
Yeah, they definitely have that. You definitely have that influence on them. So they can definitely carry whatever you had taught them in their educational life and even personal life also. You did mention that students would come to you and they would talk to you. Now, with those conversations, was it more so personal, or was it more so based upon the curriculum? Like, did you establish any after school social programs that students can come together and just discuss whatever issues that they have with themselves, whether it's personal or education related?
There was a few things that I started early in my career. I wouldn't say I started this. It was already something that was established within the school community. And I think at the time there was a vacancy, but we used to do these things called coffee houses. I would organize them with the art teacher. They would be open mics that are curated with like hot chocolate and tables and twinkly lights. And like, it was a whole thing. I also was the advisor for an art club, and then per the demand of my kids, and you guys know who you are, I then became the advisor for BSU, and I think that was my longest after school role, and that just grew out of some of the things that my students were learning in the African American history course and the social science / contemporary issues class that I taught. So I was the BSU advisor there, and within that we established an annual Black History Month Expo, which was really cool because it was student curated. So like the students helped curate what the topics of discussions were, help reach out to community organizers, lawyers, and also students would exhibit their work. Like we had small business fairs at the expo, art shows at the expo, student led sessions like the history of henna and Black hair. It was just a plethora of things. We had a fashion show. So it was really cool to be a part of like cultivating those things and like being a trusted person that students, if they wanted something, I was one of the folks that they were coming to kind of execute that. Yeah, I think I answered your question.
it gives hearing that, it sounds like it gives students an opportunity also to embrace culture. Because I can see someone with a hijab, or a gentleman with a certain style garment, but knowing the culture instead of, because you have some people, they see a turban or they see hijab and it's instant, just but learning the culture and learning that, hey, even though what you may hear out there, that doesn't mean that's that individual that you sit down with, that you meet, that you have a conversation with. And I think a lot of people base their opinions of Black people, Hispanics, anyone of Arabs, and of any foreign group, they base their opinions based off things that they hear, things that they see. Because I may see you, or you may see me, just because we're of color doesn't mean that we're thieves or criminals. I walk around my pants hanging down. You're out there in the street doing whatever. That's not the case at all. So I can say from those curriculums, you kept your students engaged. So students that had the short attention spans, what rules did you implement for them? How am I trying to ask this?
Are you asking what did I do to the ones that are like, I don't want to pay attention today, or they want like 5 seconds?
Yeah, like the ones that are like the cocky ones, the ones that are the class clowns.
We won't call them that. We don't do labels here. So what you're asking really is like, what are the norms that I created in my classroom? Yeah. And that's something that we would create with the students. So two things that I feel like people I won't say don't understand per se, but get a little confused, is that classrooms, at least to me, should have a set of rules and set of norms. Norms are cultivated by the people sharing that space. So it's on the students to create the norms in the classroom in order for us to have an autonomous, effective, intentional learning environment. And then it's on the person who is the administrator or the admin or the teacher to set the rules. And I think that the rules and norms should kind of marry in a sense. But in terms of how I would assure, or at least as much as possible, kind of rear students in, I don't like that word, but have students stay engaged, is I would make what we're learning student focus. The students who, were on the phones a lot, I was a phone collector. So like people knew, oh, you coming in here today? Miss Jennings is going to collect your phone. And then then it was on the students to collect the phone. So like I would give them roles. I would collect phones. I also tried to do things that weren't like necessarily outlandish, but like they were fun. Like have them read something they never heard of, or listen to something that they're like, Miss Jennings, what is this? Yeah. So I tried to do as much as I could to pique their interest, to maintain that engagement. But I'm also not going to sit here and act like students are engaged all the time, because they're not. Sometimes they're tired. Sometimes they had a long day. Sometimes they're just bored. That's true. But yeah, I definitely was a phone collector. And I also think one of the key engagement pieces that became like the cornerstone of what I did in the classroom was we would have student-led discussions. Our student-led discussions would happen once every week on a good week, and they were student-focused and student-driven. So the students came up with the topics, they came up with the questions, they came up with the resources, and then we as a class would disseminate the job. So we had like a student who would record participation, a student who would collect the phones, a student who would be responsible for, analyzing the entire conversation. So it kind of put the accountability on them. And I think when students feel accountable for their education, right, they're more likely to be engaged.
Yeah. And succeed, especially when they hold themselves accountable. Being a Black history teacher. Now, you taught Black history that whole 10-year period you were there, correct? Or did you?
I think I was there for like 8 years. It's a blur. But for the most part, I started out as I taught U.S. history, AP U.S. history. I inherited the African American history class, and then I built my career off of that. So, but I want to say I taught African American history most of my career. Maybe the first year I didn't. I honestly don't recall. But I taught African American history most of my career, and then within that, created like specialty courses within the subject. So I taught contemporary issues, and that used to focus on like modern day issues in Black America, and then we were connected to issues of Black folks or persons who identified as Black folks abroad. I taught an Afrofuturism course, which I don't have favorites, but that is my favorite course, where we looked at the science and technology of Black people of the past, present, and the future. So yeah, I built my career off teaching African American history, but I also tried to create as much variety as I could in the time that I could within the subject.
Do you believe that Black history is often treated as a separate subject instead of being woven into the full story of American history?
So I would say that yes. Well, a handful of things. So Black history shouldn't have to be a separate subject.
I agree.
But it is a separate subject because the way the history of America is told in mainstream is they kind of piecemeal the contributions of Black people and don't necessarily acknowledge the fact that there is no America without Black folks. And I feel like when Black history is woven into United States history or American history, it also looks at Black people and Indigenous folks from a deficit view. So they are othered. We're not acknowledging these, folks are lawyers, doctors, moms, aunties, and that they had thriving, structured communities that colonizers came and mimicked. At the same time, also in destroying their own community. So I don't think it should have it. It's necessary for it to be separate until it can be properly or woven to the point of authenticity. I feel like if you're not going to authentically weave the histories together, then they should be separate. But at the same time, Black history is American history. Like it you know what I'm saying? So it's like
It is.
My position on that is not necessarily all over the place, but I feel so many things. Black history is American history. You don't have America without Black folks. And unfortunately, it is a separate subject matter, at least in Philadelphia, for various reasons, because students were not seeing themselves in the history that they were being fed for a very long time. But I also want to say that Philadelphia is one of the few cities that has African American history as a graduation requirement. Most students are getting, a lot of the same history lessons that we got when we were young.
That's true.
Thank God for social media, because a lot of those things get dispelled through learning via the internet.
That's true. Yeah, because I remember going to school, even middle school and high school, after February, of course, Black History Month, they give us 28 days, 29 after a leap year. I can only remember learning about slavery, and I have a dream. And that's it. Nothing. Oh, Harriet Tubman Elementary School. But outside of that, no Thurgood Marshall, Marcus Garvey, Sojourner Truth. Like, I didn't learn about, they didn't, I don't remember ever them actually going into a textbook or even showing us a documentary.
Yeah, it doesn't stick.
I didn't learn about Emmett Till. Well, I learned about Emmett Till at home. I mean, you remember. They never taught us about Emmett Till in school. So I feel like it's always been dwindled down to just slavery and Dr. King.
I always say that Black history in America, because I can only speak for here, I don't know, but Black history in America is always taught in a way where students are investigating what's the most palatable historical figure. So we can tell you about Rosa Parks. We're not going to tell you about, the investigations that she was doing, looking into women who were raped and sexually assaulted by white men. We're just going to tell you that she sat on a bus. We're going to tell you that Martin Luther King had a dream, but we're not going to tell you about his Poor People's Campaign. We might tell you about the Black Panther Party, but we're not going to tell you about the socio-economic programs that they established that were then co-opted by the United States government. You know what I'm saying? Like it's we don't want to shake the tree too much, so students are only like given just little crumbs and nuggets here and there, and that's Black history in America for you. Yeah, I don't know what I was going to say.
I know sometimes teaching on Black history, sometimes you deal with a lot of sensitive subjects based upon the experiences of others, such as, like, for example, like I mentioned, Emmett Till. And even dealing with, discussions related to Ku Klux Klan and their role and what they did. So how did you navigate teaching difficult or painful parts of Black history while at the same time inspiring hope and pride for the students?
Well, I think the first thing is, when we're talking about history of the global majority, so for those of you who don't know what that means, that's everyone who is not European. You're starting with the people of the global majority. You're not talking about, them being colonized first. You know what I'm saying? So we're talking about the societies that were built by these folks before colonization. We're talking about the rebellions and insurrections and revolutions that were started and cultivated as a result of colonization. Because I think sometimes people have this weird idea that, like, oh, well, during, the enslavement of African peoples, folks weren't fighting back. And you know what I'm saying? So I try to focus on communities that were built and then rebuilt as a result of colonization, as well as the resistance. And I try to connect them to young people too, like the resistance in youth groups. Because a lot of times I think they feel like they're so far away from these figures, not understanding these folks are very young. I remember when we read the autobiography of Malcolm X, and my students they didn't understand that he was so young when he got locked up. They didn't understand that, Martin Luther King was so young. They didn't understand the Black Panther Party was started by a bunch of folks in their teens and early 20s. Like, and I'm teaching juniors and seniors, so and 10th grade, of course, but to the juniors and seniors, like, that's only a few years away from their age. Yeah. So I try to incorporate as much as resistance and autonomy, but also talking about the truth. And I think language matters too. Like, when we were young, we learned about slavery, and we talk about, we call people slaves and not enslaved. Yep. We are talking about them working on a plantation and not a death camp. We call it chattel slavement instead of the Black Holocaust. So, like, I also am very intentional with language because I want students to connect what has happened to Black people in America in the same way they would connect it to another group that gets talked about all the time. But then, like I said, I also want to focus on the resistance. There is something when students are like shocked that, like, we for example, we talked about the South African apartheid, and we looked at the indigenous communities in South Africa before the colonizers came and did, their thing, colonize. But within that, when learning about like the resistance movements, they were like shooketh to understand that thousands and thousands and thousands of students, high school students, were all over the streets protesting against having to use the colonizers' language in their classroom. So it's like, I try to give them pieces of history that are identifiable to them, and then we tether that to what's going on in the real world. You know, like we talk about thriving Black communities, thriving Black businesses. What does activism look like? It's really just how you frame it. I don't teach Black history from a deficit model because there's no deficiency there.
Yeah, there's some teachers, even when I was in middle school and high school, they stuck with the same curriculums that you see in textbooks, which is again just slavery and Harriet Tubman, Malcolm X. But to go outside of the textbook and then dig a little deeper, I feel like it'll empower a lot of students because there's many things about African Americans that many students don't even know.
Oh yeah, for sure. I'm anti-textbook. Like textbook, what? I'm not using that.
Yeah,
I'm not using that. Just because I feel like I do this thing where like we've done textbook audits. This was in my early years of teaching, and just assessing like what's in one textbook and what's in the other. Then what's missing? What is the agenda here? You know what I mean? Like,
right.
There's so many resources out there. If you're still using a textbook, no judgment, but you know, but yeah, I just think teaching from a non-deficit model, making sure that students are understanding that we're not othering these experiences, and definitely focusing on revolution and resistance.
Why? Now,
Excuse me.
How was it teaching in the Philadelphia school district?
What do you mean? Like, what do you mean? Like teaching in an urban environment?
Overall, how was, as soon as you get out of your car, step off the train and you enter into the city and you step into the school and seeing the environment overall, how was the environment of teaching in a Philadelphia school district?
I can only speak for my experience at that particular school. What I will say is, I think there's a lot of stereotypes that are associated with inner city students and inner city schools. Some of them are correct. Like I've met teachers who have to bring their own paper to school. You know, you always hear the stories about teachers in America in urban and rural environments having to buy thousands of dollars of worth of materials for their students in school. And some of my experiences, I would say, echoed some of that sentiment in slight. Like my school, you know, I was at a school that we had access to of certain things that some schools didn't have. But I will say that piece isn't as relevant as learning students in urban environments carry different things than I would say students that are not going to school in urban environments. Like I didn't go to school in an urban environment, and like I didn't have to get a job in high school. And like I'm teaching a population of students that have to get a job in high school. Some of them, you know, are the caretaker to their siblings. And I'm not saying that's just, I don't want to say that can't happen in non-urban environments. I would just say that the students in urban areas carry a different weight of students in non-urban areas. Like students in urban and rural, Title I, at the poverty line or below the poverty line are carrying a different weight. And as an educator, you are trying to kind of not necessarily break through that, but you're trying to like penetrate that as much as you can while you can, if that makes sense. And that can be challenging. And it was challenging. Like I said, sometimes we didn't teach that day. Like I remember I did a discussion on, I believe it was gun laws or something. And then it turned into a conversation about like, you know, mass shootings and how when someone's shooting up the block in Philadelphia, no one's calling that a mass shooting. But if a white kid shoots up a white school and all the other white kids in the school, it's a mass shooting. So it just like those conversations. And then you find out like kids in your classroom got shot like last year. You know what I'm saying? So like, I don't like that was very just, it was like I was in the twilight zone sometimes, like to hear some of their adult responsibilities and adult experiences and their little bodies. I'm just like, what? So I would say that is something that I don't think I would necessarily experience in a more affluent school district.
what could you say was your? Can you recall the most toughest time you had in a classroom?
Are we talking about behavioral wise, or are we talking about like we had a discussion that was too personal and everyone's breaking down?
You can, from that perspective,
Um,
where you can say it affected you.
that's a good question. I don't know. That's hard. I would say. Oh, okay. Well, there's a few of them. When students inform me about things, I'm not necessarily like, it's not necessarily on my radar. So I remember, like I said, we do student discussions all the time, and I had a student who talked about the Mexican femicides. The killing and kidnapping of young Mexican females was something that I was not aware of, and just like watching the news feed that she showed us, and like reading the material that was provided by the student. First of all, I was very impressed with the presentation, but it also just made me think about like there are still so many like things that I'm not connecting to students of other demographics, because I taught African American history and I tried to do my best, connecting culturally to other cultures. But I think that just like triggered me a little, because it just made me go back and kind of reflect on my practice. Anytime sexual assault stories would come up, like anytime, I always did a harkness on sex education and consent, and just to kind of see what students don't understand is like jarring, but then also for them to be comfortable enough to share their like personal traumatic experience is also like there were plenty of times early in my career that I was just like, y'all, I have to leave for like 5 minutes. Not really, but I had to leave and gather myself, or I just wouldn't say anything. And I remember it got to the point where the kids would know, because I didn't like cry like that, but the kids would know that like if I'm like silent or if my posturing is slightly different, that I'm like having an internal moment. And I love that they were able to kind of like continue the conversation without my facilitation, because I was so like, I cannot believe like they just told me that. Wow. So I would say those moments were the toughest, because then the bell rings and you're like, this kid just done told me that she done saw or he done did, like, you know what I mean? And then you just go about your day carrying it for the whole day, into the next day, into the next week. Like you see them all the time,
That's a lot.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, that sounds like a lot. But again, that goes back to that parental role. Do you think parents are partially at fault for the state of education in the United States?
No. I feel like this is a loaded question. Okay, so 2 things. I think education starts at home, but the state of education is more structural, institutional. America has never been invested in public education. Like you know what I mean? Like there's no reason why classrooms should be overcrowded. Teachers got to bring their own paper. There's no reason for that. There's no reason why some schools have more and others have less. I think the state of public education is a direct connection to institutional racism. The tax dollars from the schools, and the schools that have more affluent communities have access to more things, and the schools that don't have less access. But education is supposed to be equitable, which means everyone should be getting access as it is tailored to the need of the student. And that's an institutional problem. I wouldn't necessarily say that that's a parental problem, but I will say that advocacy is also important. Right. You know what I mean? Like you can go into a suburb, and if there's something being put up that those people don't want in their communities, they're going to advocate for it. And I'm not saying that same advocacy does not happen in urban environments, because I believe that it does. I just think it gets overlooked. But I also think that there is sometimes this like, well, we got, this is all we have. We got to do the best we can. And I think that unlearning has to happen. And I think that starts with the parents, so they can pour that unlearning into their children. But I would say the state of education is structural, and we are all recipients or victims of that structure.
I kind of want to take a turn on the conversation. You put your stamp all over Philadelphia. Yes, you did. Um, I can definitely say that. And like I said, when I read some of the articles, I didn't know it was a lot that you did. I remember watching Fox 29, and I believe that's South Philly, around is that Old City, the area?
The 7th Ward?
Yes.
Society Hill.
Yeah, yeah.
It's Society Hill.
Yeah. Now, Affirmations Avenue.
Affirmation. No S. Yes.
Afromation Avenue. Tell the viewing audience a little more about Afromation Avenue and and its purpose.
Okay. So for those of you who do not know, my best friend and I started a street art project called Afromation Avenue. That is essentially a avenue of positive affirmations that highlight historically Black and or currently Black communities in Philadelphia. We work with local Black artists. Depending on what's going on, we'll collaborate with Black-owned businesses. And there's a lot of community involvement as to what the signs should represent, what the messaging should look like. And we've been doing that this would be the 4th year, I want to say.
Wow.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's like, I know that the project exists, and sometimes we have imposter syndrome where we're like, if we're not really in it, it's like, oh yeah, I forgot. Yeah, we do have that. But yeah, we're located in West Philadelphia. So our first location is in West Philly along 52nd Street corridor, which at one point was considered Black Wall Street. It goes down the corridor all the way through Malcolm X Park. And then we also have a few signs off of Cobbs Creek Parkway, where the Larson Skatehouse is, which is if I'm not mistaken, the first Black-owned ice skating rink, where a Black architect was also acquired in the design. Our second location is in Germantown, so we are along Germantown Avenue in front of KKD Theater, a Black-owned business, Uncle Bobby's, a Black-owned business, and Ubuntu Fine Art Gallery, which is also a Black-owned business. We're also located Germantown as well along the Maplewood Mall Strip, where there are a lot of Black-owned businesses, and in front of Vernon Park, where the Black Writers Museum is. Our last location, which we just revealed in November, is within the 7th Ward. So the 7th Ward is the largest historically Black area it was the largest historically Black area in Philadelphia during the 20th century. So during that time, there were, Black folks were migrating, and there were pockets of Black communities in the city of Philadelphia, and Ward 7 was the largest one. Du Bois has a book called The Philadelphia Negro, which is the first anthropological study of Black people in general, and he pinpoints the 7th Ward as a part of that study. So within that area, we are in front of Mother Bethel Church. We go all the way down to South Street, and we end at what was the Institute for Colored Youth. I believe it's now like an apartment complex. So we're right in the crux of historical Black Philadelphia.
Would you ever take Afromation Avenue outside of Philadelphia?
Yeah, that's the goal. I mean, historically Black spaces are all over the United States. So the goal is to, hit as many areas in the city of Philadelphia as we can, and within that adopt, sister cities in other parts of the country is like the large goal.
What legacy are you hoping to leave behind from being at Constitution High and having an influence on your students and them coming to you, and the community engagement? Mm-hmm. What kind of legacy are you hoping to leave behind?
That's an interesting question. I would say that I guess, it's interesting because I don't think I do the work to like intentionally leave a legacy. per se. I think it's just if you're going to remember anything about the work that I've done, I just want people to know that I was like for the people. Yeah, I would say my work is for the people and it's informed by the people. Mm-hmm. So I guess that would be the legacy.
Well, I can definitely say that you left a legacy and an impression on many others. That's something I want you to see.
Okay.
I gotta grab my laptop.
Okay. This better not be anything embarrassing. If the camera cuts to this, I'm gonna be upset.
Nah, it's not embarrassing. Trust me, it's not. All right.
He could be lying.
I'm gonna have you turn my brightness up. You wanna hold that?
Oh, okay.
And just hit the space bar.
The space bar.
Hi, Jen. It's been some time. I'm about to go into like my last year of university, and I haven't had like the last time I've had your class was like sophomore year of high school, which is probably like not even sophomore year, freshman year of high school, which was like 2018, 2019. So it's been some time. I was so excited when your brother reached out to me to ask me to record this video because like anyone who talks to me, especially like on my college campus, knows like about you and how much I've like learned from you. So right now I attend the University of Rochester. I'm double majoring in political science and Black studies, pre-law track with the intentions to go into law school to become a criminal defense attorney. And anytime someone asks me like, oh, why do you want to pursue law? Why do you want to pursue criminal defense? Why are you a Black studies major? I'm like, well, I had this teacher in high school named Miss Jennings, and she taught African American history, which like a lot of people, I notice here, especially in upstate New York or like in different schools, they never took African American history. We just became a major 3 years ago, our Black Studies department, which is really small. We only have about like 7 teachers too. So I was shocked when I'm like, yeah, I took African American history. It was required for us to graduate high school. People are like, oh, it was required? I'm like, yeah. And I learned so much through African American history, so much to the point where like I finished my major sophomore year, which you have to take 10 classes with the African American Studies department, which is now the Black Studies department. I've taken 15. Being at like Constitution, where I want to say like you were the only Black teacher, I've always found myself more like comfortable with you. Learning African American history and even contemporary issues, which I was really fond of those 2 classes. Different things about how Black history really became a thing. I remember reading Passing and being really connected with it, reading Stamp. I had to read Stamp here at my school, and I'm like, I read this already in high school. They're like, you read this in high school? And I'm like, yeah. I had a whole summer project about it. I already know about Ibrahim X. Kennedy. Also, even reading Buck. We read Buck in your class, and then my professor here made us read it again in our 50 years of hip hop class, and just rereading it again and reading like all the stuff that the author and Buck talks about. And being from Philadelphia, I'm like, oh wow, like this is like, I just felt like I've learned so much from you that I've like applied it here to my major, and I feel so like really advanced. And even just like being in small organizations like Black Students Union on campus, Race and Equity Committee, they just made me so passionate. Like I felt your passionate and your activism through myself, and that's what made me want to like pursue the path that I'm pursuing. I've become so passionate about the incarceration system and how mass incarceration disproportionately affects Black and brown people. Black men 5 times more likely to go to jail than white men. And I've taken on like this role, or like I've become this activist where I've worked with different things like the public defender's office. I've had several internships. I've been reaching out to like the Equal Justice Initiative because I want to initially help with that field. Like one of my main interests are mass incarceration, school to prison pipeline, wrongful convictions, and the prison climate, which is actually disgusting at the moment. Um, one of the I remember a lot of things from your class and how much you've taught me. And I was basically telling your brother like how much like I appreciate your class and I appreciate you as a person. You've made me so passionate about like Black studies, activism, Black people in general. Another thing I really appreciated about you is like I feel like you always kept it real with us, you know, being in the Philadelphia school district. We were not really afforded a lot of the things that like other schools were afforded, and it was like I feel like I was actually given a real education, especially with like African American history, because a lot of people aren't afforded the privilege of learning African American history or like things, contemporary issues, or like anything regarding race with a Black teacher. And I was privileged enough to get that knowledge from you, and I was also privileged enough to like learn so much other things from you. Um, what else? Lastly, I just want to say I appreciate everything you've done for me. You probably don't realize it, but like I am forever grateful for having like went to Constitution, taken your class, taken um, two of your classes, contemporary issues, African American history, being a part of BSU, being a part of Race and Equity. And you was even like our cheer coach, well, like when we didn't have a cheer coach. So extremely grateful to be taught different things about my history and take that knowledge and apply it to wherever I go. And being how I am now, being a Black Studies major and going into law to pursue a profession that only 3% of Black people pursue, wanting to like change the world just with me. You've made me want to do that, and I'm forever grateful to you. So thank you, Jen. I hope wherever you go, which I know you'll go far, it's all love and prosperity because you deserve it.
Hi, my name is Amaya. I am a former student
She's
of
quiet.
Miss Jennings, or Brittni, as most of you know her. One thing I appreciate most about Miss Jennings is the love she gave. She loved us down, and every student felt it, but specifically me. Her ability to not only control a classroom, but have a classroom respond to her so well. It takes such a superpower to be able to touch so many lives, because it wasn't just me that she touched. There's so many other people that were in my class, in the class below my class, that just love Miss Jennings to this day. I wouldn't be so insightful on Black people, Black history, African American struggles. She has taught me a lot. She is the most fantastic teacher I've ever had. She sticks with me in everything that I do. She inspired me to become a teacher. She has instilled proudness of Blackness. She made me so proud to be a Black woman. I think she is one of the smartest women I know. What she poured into not only the class, but into her students carries with us throughout our lives. I can say that I learned the most from Miss Jennings. She made us feel so proud, and she made sure that we knew we are excellent. We have excellence in us, and we can literally do anything. And I think that Miss Jennings is the best person on this planet, and I miss her so much. I love you, Miss Jennings.
I really loved your class.
Oh
Yours,
my God.
your class was my favorite class, and it was my only Black class I had in Constitution. Until like I think 12th grade when they brought in Miss Davison, Miss Davis, something like that. But your class was my favorite class, like hands down, and it was always so calm in there. It was always so calm compared to every other class I was into. And you were always the most calmest person ever. Yeah, you had so much engagement, and you didn't have to yell at your students. amplify your voice at all in order to get a calm classroom. And I always like wonder why, but it was just like your teacher, you as a teacher were really respected by students. And I really hope to be a teacher like you when I start being a teacher. You always called in the quiet kids. You always reaffirmed in your students that they do know something and that they need to change the language they use when they start a statement or have an opinion or speak out loud, to not say I think, but to say I know or I believe, which was one thing like always like stays in my head to now when I do talk or anything like that. And I remember you always told me to amplify my voice, which I'm trying to do. But it's so much of what you said and the points you would give me as a pretty shy and quiet kid that I still even use to today. Your classroom and you alone like really brought me on my shell. And I really appreciate that. I really loved your class. I would literally take the class over again today. Hope you have an amazing day, amazing week, amazing month, and continue to be the Black person we need in the public school system. And yeah, goodbye.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Told you I had a surprise.
I'm crying. Like literally. And it was called camera.
I mean, like they go.
I love you guys.
Yeah, it goes back to not many. Again, students come to school and they look forward to seeing that one teacher because of me. Who knows their situations at home, whether they're getting the attention from their parents or from whoever. But speaking with them, it sounds like you definitely had a great influence on them. And you live by your own quote. Education is about cultivating a wealth of knowledge, but also a wealth of character. So that alone was embodied in all three of them. You built a teacher. You built a teacher. You built a teacher. You built a I believe it was Amaya who said that she was going to school to be an attorney.
Oh, that was Aaliyah.
It was Aaliyah, yes, yeah. Aaliyah. It was Aaliyah who said that she was going to school to be.
I would say pour into.
Yeah, pour into.
Pour into.
But you still took part in shaping those minds because, like you said, small seed.
That's true. So
it wasn't my intention to purposely make you cry.
Yes,
but
there, y'all will never see that again.
But because before this interview, it came to my mind because I saw them respond to the post on Instagram. It came to my mind literally that Monday. I should reach out to them.
That's so funny, and
I did. So it was. I
appreciate you guys. I love you guys.
It was supposed to be 6 videos, but I didn't hear from the other one, so that was fine.
I don't put them on blast like that.
I know I won't. But I appreciate you being here.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
And being a part of the exchange. Ladies and gentlemen, episode 2, I have the lovely Brittni Jennings. Those who don't know, this is my blood sister. Educated, even me personally, I can say with my own personal experiences and things that I've dealt with and experienced, she has been a great influence on my life also. I don't say that much because, she decided to leave the bird's nest. And, but I don't say that much, but I'm thankful to you, seriously. And
well, thank you so much.
Seriously.
I'm so proud you're finally doing this. Like, you've been talking about this for a very long time. Like, finally, you did the thing.
A long time. So, and I'm glad that you were able to be a part of the journey. So, I want to personally thank Aaliyah Breeziak Amaya Boston and Nicole Barnes for sending me those videos. And I hounded Aaliyah only because I had her contact others. I contacted Amaya, and she was able to contact Nicole. So I was able to get those videos in, and everything worked out perfectly. But this was episode 2 of the Exchange in Our podcast. Look forward to episode 3. Hit that like, share, subscribe button. Again, I'm your host, Cameron Nicholas. See you once again.